Thank you. It is indeed a pleasure to be here. Family Search is delighted to be a sponsor for this event. AJ is just fabulous. What an idea to pull off, and it is just absolutely astounding to see what he's been able to do. Of course, it's delightful to greet all my new cousins, and some of you I don't quite know yet, but we're not doing the group hug thing at the end, but it's okay. We'll be fine. Family Search was organized as the Genealogical Society of Utah in 1894, so we've been around for a long time. Family Search is our online presence and now the name under which we do most of our business. So I want to share with you a few things about Family Search, but I want to illustrate for you the types of things that probably are in your families. You just may not know where they are, just in the same way that I didn't. So they've just introduced me. I've done professional genealogy for years and years and years. Guess what? I had family members that held out on me and didn't give me and share with me information that they knew that I didn't know. And so it's been kind of fun, and I'll share some of that with you. It's interesting to just see what happens. Family Search is a community of people working together. So many people make this come together and make great things happen. We'll talk about that in just a moment. It's all aspects. It's people who are new to genealogy. It's people who are experienced. It's people who have the stories in the family. My mother was a storyteller. Any of you have family members that are storytellers? Yeah, you need to capture those stories. And people who want to give back or pay it forward, as the case may be. One of the things that you can do on a daily basis is to share a memory. Share those with your kids and share those with other family members. My sister and I have been doing this interesting thing of late. Our parents are deceased, and I have been kind of picking up, and I'll remember pieces of a story. And so I'll shoot that off to my sister who lives in Arizona, and I'll say, Cam, I can't quite remember all the details of this. Can you tell me, can you fill in the blanks? And she'll shoot back, and sure enough, she will fill in the blanks. We did something totally fun the other day. You know what we did? We listed the names of all the dogs we ever had in the family, and where we got them, and what happened to them. Now, it seems like a dumb thing, but my kids were fascinated by that and fascinated by all the dog names. Some of them were pretty stupid. One thing that you ought to do, this is my tip, you ought to think about a dog's name and think of it this way. Think about having to go down the street yelling that name when the dog's lost. Okay, that's what you ought to do. Well, family stories come in two varieties. Some are true, some aren't. Any of you have family stories that you found out later just really weren't true? Well, that's the case with all families, but you know what? That story, even if it wasn't true, became part of the family history. And so you should still document it, and you should still talk about it. Family Search has developed some mobile apps that are incredible for capturing those family stories. I have the mobile app on my phone, and when somebody starts telling a story, I pop that thing on, and I capture that memory, and then I can upload it and keep it for generations to come. You can also capture pictures. Many of you have taken pictures today at this family reunion, and you can share those with your family members and give a shout out there for those. The audio portion is just superb. It means that you always have the ability to record a family memory. You can document who it was, and you just have these snippets. So the mobile apps that Family Search has are incredible, and I would encourage you to use those. You can take photos of photos, and I went to a family reunion in Texas here a little while back, and people had brought a bunch of family photos that they wanted to share at the family reunion, and so it was extremely easy to just snap photos of those photos, tag who they were, tag who had them, and then share those. Well, I alluded to people holding out family information on you. If we had a lot longer, I could tell you a number of things that my family held out on me, but pretty much this one was a little bit of a shocker. When my aunt passed away, we went through her material, and in her papers, we found this letter. This letter was from the first senator of the state of Arizona, and it referenced a bill that was submitted to get money back and a claim for my great-grandparents. Now remember, I'd been a professional genealogist since 1977. This was, 1999. Had my aunt ever mentioned that she had this letter? No. Well, I look at that letter, and sure enough, it's about my great-grandparents, pictured here, Peter Jens Jensen and Charlotte Oman. Well, the interesting thing was I learned some things about America, and I learned some things haven't changed since 1912 when the bill was introduced. Senator Henry Ashurst introduced that bill, and he said, "Now, while I have introduced this bill and am impressed with the idea that this is a just claim, I must frankly tell you that it will require an enormous amount of patience and labor to even get this bill favorably reported by the committee. As you know, the machinery of Congress is geared to run very slowly, and it may be months, even years, before we can point to a victory in this case." Is that not still true today? Yeah, and you thought Congress only moved slow today. No, it's been going on for a long time. Well, this bill was all about land. It was about land that my great-grandparents had settled on in Arizona. Members of this little community, there were 27 families, members of this community had ridden over to Fort Apache, and they had asked the commandant at Fort Apache if they could settle on this land. The commandant said, "Absolutely, it's not on reservation land. You're welcome to settle there. We would love to have you settle." So these 27 families marked off 160-acre plots. Why 160 acres? Because of the Homestead Act in this country. They were developing that land, and they were going to apply for homestead. Well, they were there almost 3 years, and guess what? Soldiers from Fort Apache rode out one day and said, "This is now reservation land, and you have to remove off this land." So all of the improvements, all of the crops, all of the buildings, everything they had to completely leave and move away from there. So with Senator Ashurst, they had made a claim to this. What had happened was related in the documentation in Washington, D.C. by Chief Alchesay, who was an Indian scout for Lieutenant Charles Gatewood. Some of you may remember Charles Gatewood. Some of you remember the movie Geronimo. Charles Gatewood was the one who got Geronimo to surrender, finally. Well, I did a lot of research on this thing, and I find out that, sure enough, as you can see from the dark line, you see this little community up here called Forestdale up at the top. When they started, it was not on reservation lands, but that dotted line now across the top shows that when they drew the boundary, they were now on reservation lands. But all the contemporary maps of the time said they weren't. So, how many of you think they got money for their claim? Yeah. No, they didn't. And interestingly enough, by the time he submitted 7 consecutive bills into Congress, trying to get them reported out of committee, trying to get them voted upon, by the time they got all the way through that, both of my great-grandparents had passed away. So, pretty interesting when it works that way. One of the other great things that you can do with Family Search is you can make connections. We can connect to each other. We can learn who's working on the same families. There are some things there that we really need to understand and learn how we are connected to each other. You can make discoveries on Family Search because there are numerous historical records, and we'll talk about that here because there are so many records. We have online 5.8 billion records in Family Search. And I should mention, they're free. Family Search is not a paid subscription site. You can go on, you can create an account. We do have you create an account, but it is free. You're welcome to look at that material as much as you want. One of the interesting things is we post online between 1.5 and 2 million records each and every day. Each and every day. Well, that's pretty phenomenal. So what I'm saying is, if you don't find your people today, come back in a few days. Who knows what record we may have posted by then, because we've got records from all over the world being posted. The way we do this is that there are people who truly do make a difference. Many of us either have language skills or handwriting skills, or we simply want to learn how to do that. We have over 300,000 indexers that index those records each and every day and help us to accomplish that. And so this indexing goes directly to these records, and then you can get to the exact image that your ancestor's name is on and read that record. Some of them are church records, some of them are census records, some of them are vital records, birth, marriage, and death. You never know what's happening. Well, in that way, we connect generations. Now, it wouldn't do us any good to connect all those generations if we didn't have some place to store it. And so we have created an online public tree. And that public tree gives you the ability to add to those generations and to work with others, because we do have a shared ancestry. We have a very traditional view of that, where you can look at the pedigree chart and you can see mother and father, husband and wife. We also have some unique views. One is the fan chart. The kids especially like this one. Fans out your ancestors, you can fill in, you can see where the blanks are, you can look at that. The other one that I really like is the portrait view, where if you have pictures. So we just saw Maureen give an excellent talk on portraits and photographs. You can actually list those, you can publish those up on your site, and you can begin to have the pictures of your ancestors. Well, if we go back 30 generations, that would be 750 years, assuming 25 years per generation. First you have 2 parents, then you have 4 grandparents, you have 8 grandparents, 16 great-grandparents, 32 great-great-grandparents, 64, 128, you get the picture, so on, right? Eventually you'd have 1.73 billion ancestors, right? Now, that's not the way the math works. Why? Again, because we have shared ancestry. So, in the 13th century, there are about 400 million people on the earth. Less than 30 generations ago, your mother or your father's gene lines were merged and have common to both. Most of us in this room are probably 8th to 9th cousins. At most, we're about 50th cousins. Well, when you go back 50 generations, that overlap is enormous. The total number of ancestors in 7 generations is 127. What's interesting is what descends from that. So if we come down from those 7 generations, there are likely over 10,000, almost 11,000 individuals that are here. So you can see very quickly how closely we're related and why there are so many generations. From the 7 generations of life, Guy Rencher made this statement: the entire human species can be encompassed within the scope of 50th cousinhood. If that is correct, then your ancestors include not only some Caucasians, some blacks, some Chinese, some Arabs, but there's a high probability that you are a direct descendant of Muhammad, Krishna, Confucius, Abraham, Buddha, Caesar, and Ishmael. So, it is, again, as we say, a very shared ancestry. One of the things that I want to share with you is a little bit of a different perspective when it comes to DNA. How many of you have grandchildren in your family that look like the grandparents? You'll see similarities. I have earlobes that are much like my grandfather's. My son has the same earlobes. You start to see similarities from there. Well, in our family, we had worked on a line in New England for a long time. We'd been trying to find and prove the parentage for an ancestor called Stephen Farr. Stephen Farr, we believed, had a number of children. We believed that he had 8 children. Only one of them appeared in the town records. And so the researchers have gone back in, and one day, one of them found a note in the margin. And the note was from the guy whose job it was to record births in this New England town. And the note said, "I quit." And then he said, "The reason I quit is there are so many families refusing to register the births of their children." And the first family named were the Farrs, as those who would not register their children. Well, we took these people that we thought were all related, and we went out and we got DNA samples from the descendants on those. And sure enough, when we did that, we were able to prove that they were all descended from that one line. So what we hadn't been able to do for the last 100 years with the advent of DNA, we were able to do now by proving that these people all had the same DNA chain. Well, as if that wasn't good enough, we had identified a potential christening entry for Stephen Farr in England, in Bedford, England, and we believed that that was our Stephen Farr who came to America, but we couldn't prove it. It's not like when he's christened, they put a little note in the margin that says, this man went to America. It'd be nice if they did that, but they don't do that. So, again, using DNA, we tracked the descendants of that Farr family in Bedford, England. We actually found a living descendant in Belgium and got a DNA sample from him. And so you will see that there is a striking resemblance between the president of the Farr family organization, David Farr, and this descendant in Belgium. Isn't that striking? Well, in some instances, it works like that. In other instances, it does not. Lee Davidson was a Deseret News columnist for the Salt Lake newspaper, the Deseret News. He was the Washington correspondent. He also was an amateur genealogist, and he worked at the Family History Center that we have in suburban Maryland. And one night, as he was working, a lady came in, and she sat down and started doing her research. And as she did her research, he went about doing his things, and then finally he went over and he sat at a computer next to hers. And he was just going back and forth and looking at his files, and pretty soon he glanced over at her screen. And he was shocked to see that she had the exact same screen up on her computer that he had on his computer. Now, Lee Davidson was much like me. He was a white male. He was in a business suit. But the woman sitting next to him was African American. And so he turned to her and he said, I have Beck's ancestors. Do you have Beck's ancestors? And she looked at him and said, well, yes, I have Beck's ancestors. And so he turned his screen so that she could see it. And he said, we're looking at the exact same ancestor. Do you have this ancestor, Joannes Nevis, married to Maria Becks? And she said, yes. And he said, then our looks betrayed what each of us were thinking. I'm related to you. But they were, in fact. Her ancestors had left the Netherlands and gone to South Africa. And the descendants had later come to the United States. His ancestors had left, come to what was then New Netherlands, later New York, and had gone on out into the Midwest, had fought in the Civil War, had been driven out of Missouri, and ended up in Utah. And so the interesting thing was, here were the two of them were looking at the exact same screen, the exact same ancestors. And so just as we all went out on the parade ground out here and sang, we are family, we truly are family. And at most, we are 50th cousins as we sit here today. And so it's with certainty that I can call you all cousins and know that I am correct in that. So Family Search truly is a community of people working together. We are people who are absolutely brand new to genealogy. Maybe you've never done any family research. We hope that you do that. We hope that you will use our free tool and our free resources. We hope that you will create a family tree. We hope that you will link the materials that you find in Family Search and elsewhere to that tree as the documentary evidence for that. We hope that you will work on the experienced genealogists and work off of the work that they have done as they put that together. We hope that you will capture the stories in your family. I so hope, and as we are at this event today, and as one of the major objectives of this event is to help find a cure for Alzheimer's, one of the things that's extremely important is even people who have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's still have moments of brilliance when they are lucid. And I hope that you will capture those memories. And I hope that you will use, if not the Family Search app, I hope you will use some convention that says that you have been able to capture and preserve that history. And then if you are part of that community that just simply wants to give back and wants to pay it forward, we would welcome you to get online with us and to index records. All of our records are double keyed, and then there's an arbitrator that arbitrates the differences. So you don't need to worry about making mistakes. Our accuracy rate is still in the high 90% from that effort, because we have one indexer key it in the A, and we have one indexer key it in the B, and then we have somebody who arbitrates the differences. So it's always good to know that there's plenty of work to do, and I hope that you will enjoy using Family Search, and thank you so much for being here.